It's time for the Phil Ferguson Show.
Benvenuti. Welcome, everybody. This is Phil Ferguson, and you are listening to The Phil Ferguson Show. From time to time, I talk about specific products and how they can end up making more money with your money than you do. And from time to time, I get people that claim that I'm making this shit up. It is truly staggering. And I have a long list of show topics and suggestions, and many have come from listeners, and I will try to get to many of them as we go through the weeks, months, and maybe years of this. I started to wonder if I would ever run out of topics, but no, there's an endless list of them, and I just got delivered to me by a listener, something brand new, well, new to me anyway, and it's great fun for me to talk about this. But it's not great fun for him because he bought it. And he may come on the show in a few weeks to talk about it. He may not. He's thinking about it. But I'm going to give you some information without disclosing any personal information. What he showed me is this, well, like I said, brand new to me. I've only done this 20 years. You'd think I'd know it all, but I know better. There's an endless supply. This is a CD, or a certificate of deposit, kind of likey thingy. And I actually recently talked about certificates of deposit, what you would normally get at your bank, and it might pay 1 or 2 or 3% if you get a 5-year long one. And they might be callable, they might be variable, they might be adjustable. Well, apparently, they're getting fancier and fancier. And this one is called a market-linked CD product. Now, of course, it's amazing. If they use the word product, you should be scared. The other thing that this one uses in the name is it uses the word momentum. And momentum is one of those buzzy words that is often used in the world of tactical investing. And I did a show on tactical investing. I think it was 177 back in July of 16. I talked about the philosophies of tactical investing. The one I focused on specifically there was this idea, which is a bedrock of tactical investing, that you create an algorithm, a mathematical model, dare I say, and you pretend like you ran it backwards 5 or 10 or 15 years, and you see what the results are. If the results suck, what do? You throw out your model, and you make another model, or you tweak it. And you keep doing this until you get results that look pretty good. And you show people the back-tested data. If you ever see anything that's back-tested, you should just think to yourself, it's completely bullshit. It's worthless. It is worse than worthless because it will tend to give you the impression that it's valuable when it's not. And this is a product that is not only a CD or a certificate of deposit. It is a tactical investment. It's a momentum builder. It is also a proprietary fund, which means you have restrictions on when and how you can sell it and how you can find what it's actually worth. And because it is a proprietary product and you probably sign a contract to get it, you might pay a significant penalty once you find out how awful it is and try to get your money out. I'm still working on the contract, but I do have the PDF put out by the organization. And just so you know, this is the GS Momentum Builder Asset Class 5ER Index. And GS stands for Goldman Sachs. And I'm going to bore you with some of the details that are in this PDF that you can go find on the internet yourself. It says the GS Momentum Builder Multi-Asset 5ER Index, and then it has highlights, bullet points, provides exposure to ETFs whose underlying indexes track equity, fixed income, emerging markets, commodities, inflation, and alternative assets. So if it wasn't clear that they can do almost anything, they had to throw in alternative assets, which generally means things other than all the stuff that's listed above. It could be real estate. It could be viaticals, which are life insurance policies you buy from a person that has AIDS and is going to die, or some other serious illness. The next bullet point seeks to provide exposure to price momentum of several asset classes using a methodology developed by Goldman Sachs and Company. Well, they've got to put Goldman Sachs in there because we all know if your money is with Goldman Sachs, it's going to be just fine. So momentum is this philosophy in the tactical world that when the markets go up, they tend to keep going up. And when the markets go down, they tend to keep going down. Well, that holds true until it fucking doesn't. And so sometimes the markets go up for several days, and the momentum philosophy would say to buy, and then it turns around and goes down. And it goes down for several days, and then they sell. And then it turns around back up and goes up. And so what they end up doing repetitively over and over and over quick succession is buying high and selling low. Of course, any fund that's tactical can be very dangerous in a taxable account. You may end up not making money or even losing money in a calendar year, but yet having a tax bill. So that's good fun to think about. It goes on here. Combines 14 underlying ETFs across 6 asset classes and a cash equivalent through a money market position that seeks to capture the highest historical returns among the universe of underlying assets selected by the index sponsor, subject to constraints on maximum weights and volatility controls. That is a lot of words. If you understood all of that, please let me know, because I'm not sure that I do. It goes on. It is rebalanced monthly over a period of 5 days and may be rebalanced as frequently as daily if it is realized volatility exceeds the volatility cap. What? It has target volatility. 5% is measured on a monthly basis, sets a maximum limit on the annualized historic realized volatility of each monthly rebalance date. Again, more word soup. So what they're basically doing is they're looking at the entire universe of different asset classes, and they've created a proprietary model that guesses based on who knows what's going to win and what's going to lose in the next month or two. And they do what's called a look back, and they check the performance based on 1, 3, and 6 month performance and or volatility. Many tactical funds, they either suggest that they will give you market-like returns with less volatility, or this one takes a little more gentler approach that you won't get, as much, but you'll have way less volatility. So the question for me is, do you invest for volatility or do you invest for returns? I think if you're 10 to 12 or more years from retirement, in my opinion, and we can have a polite discussion and disagreement about this, your goal is total returns. I don't really give a shit if my portfolio goes up or down 20, 30, 40, 50% in a given year. I want the most money when I retire. And when you get to retirement or close to retirement, you start to build or you utilize something that I call the cushion. So the money you're going to need for the next decade is safe. It's not going to make a lot, but you know what it's going to do within a few percentage points. And then the rest of the money you can take volatility risk with. So the cushion should be as big as necessary, but as small as possible to maximize your long-term returns. Back to this product, if we may. So it goes on, and it talks about all the different limits and maximum and minimum weights and all the things it can do. And then it has a pretty chart. And this chart shows all of the different types of asset classes that they can invest in, all the way back from 2004. And then it shows you the results of all these different asset classes. And guess what thing has the single best result? Of course, they do. Like I said before, if their model didn't work backwards in time, they would find a new model. So their model suggests that from 2004 through today, they've beaten every single asset class, I think, except for U.S. real estate. So they've done pretty well. And they've done it with a whole lot less volatility. So you can sleep at night. You get to make the vast majority of the returns without the volatility. And it all sounds a little nice. And this beautiful chart, it to me gives the impression that all of this data is actually real historical data. Well, the funny thing, almost all of it is real historical data, except for the actual product that they're selling. And there's a little footnote. There's a little number 4 superscript at the end of the description for this chart. And then below, there is a really big, long paragraph that tells you what that little bullet point 4 means. And I'm going to read you some of that. This is the footnote for the graph. The values of the individual asset classes, ETFs, are total return. The total return versions are calculated by Solactive AG. I do not know them. Date January 2nd, 2013. Values between 2004 and 2004 for both GS Multi 5 and the individual asset class ETFs may be based on a proxy for each asset class. Okay, so it may not actually be the asset class, but they're trying. Back-tested and other statistical analysis materials that is provided in connection with the index use simulated analysis and hypothetical circumstances to estimate how it may have performed prior to its actual existence. Anything that you look at that has the declaration that it's back-tested data is completely and totally worthless at best. If it's back-tested, it means it's not future-tested. It's never actually been run during that time period. It's someone's idea of what might work. And a fund like this, now this one does have some limits, but in a true, purely unregulated tactical fund, it may have 100% in the U.S. stock market today, and then 100% in the international stock market tomorrow. And then it might have 180% in bonds. That's right, I meant to say that. 180% in bonds because it has negative 80% in cash, which means they borrowed money to leverage the bonds. All of these have trading costs. All of these have potential tax consequences if you are in a taxable account. And if you are a higher income person who is very attractive to someone selling these, you're probably in a higher tax rate. So instead of making 15% capital gains in a long run, you might pay 28 to 35 to 39.6 every single year if you actually make money. Now, I was able to find, where was it? From Bloomberg.com. Apparently, they have figured out a way to track this portfolio and look at its results. In the last 12 months ending today, February 13th, the date I'm doing this little segment, it shows a one-year return of 5.2%. And you might think, hey, 5.2%. I know from Phil that the market normally makes about 10 in the long run per year. So 5% with a lot less volatility might sound pretty attractive when bonds are paying 2 or 3%. And trust you me, I'm sure they will use that information in their marketing materials. What they don't tell you, or what you may not know, is in the last 12 months, exactly ending today, the middle of February in 2017, the S&P 500 is up 25% because there was a big dip in January and early February of 2016. So the market had a lot of room to go up. It's up 25% plus about 2% for dividends, 27%. So you had way less volatility. That's true. But you made 5.2 instead of 27%. Now, this fund, this investment product also suggests there's some kind of multiplier where you can get 200% more than what you thought you were going to get when it ends in 7 years. And I don't know exactly how that works because I don't have the contract. I only have a promotional PDF, which gives you the sales pitch. And I basically tell people that these kinds of documents, it's like a PowerPoint presentation. Sure, it's pretty, but it doesn't have the real details. If you ever think about buying something like this, you must read the contract, which can be 40, 80, 150 pages long. And if you don't understand all of it, maybe you shouldn't invest in it. I try to not buy things that I don't understand. And even after reading all of this, I don't fully understand how that double is going to work. And you know what? Maybe it's really, really good. I'm not betting on it. So right now what I'm going to have happen is my client is asking their agent what this would be worth if they sold it today. And we're going to find out if they get an answer, and I may have to report back to you that it's fantastic, but I don't think so. But that's something else that's out there that they used back-tested data, and that means fictional data. It doesn't have any value, and it's counterproductive because it gives the impression that it's real data and real value, and only in the footnote, if you read it, and do you find out that it's kind of fantasy land. So there's another example of something that you might want to think about avoiding, and that is called, again, market-linked certificate of deposits. It sounds like it's safe because it's CDs that you could make more money in, but buyer beware. And we'll take a little break and go on with more stuff in the show. All right, everybody. I'm going to do something a little different here. It's an email segment, and I'm going to read some things from one of my listeners' emails, and this person will know who he or she is. And before I go into detail, I wanted to make sure that this listener, who I love every listener, had some things in their email that caused some concerns for me. And it's not them. I'd get these more and more, and I think as the show grows and I get new listeners, maybe some new listeners don't fully understand my philosophies and strategies of how to invest. And so maybe they're getting the little segments in the 15 or 20 minute part that's finance and not know how to incorporate that within the context of my overall grand philosophy. I mean, there's some basic ideas, and then there's little technical things that I do. So maybe if I present a little technical thing, they don't know how to place it into the bigger overall scheme. So I wanted this listener to know that I'm not picking on you, and you are not the only person to send emails like this. And I would get one here and there, but as the show grows, I get more and more of them. And I had several of them today. So I thought it was appropriate to take one of these as an example and try to clear up some of the things, because it is definitely possible that I am failing as a communicator, and that makes me very sad. So I don't know if it's the interpretation on the listener's end, or if it's me not being clear, or maybe it's both. So I want to do my part to try to clear up a couple things that were brought up, a couple things that concern me with this email and many other emails, and I have sent a personal response. And it's one of those things that if you send me an email, first of all, it's now getting to the point where it's very hard for me to respond to every email. I may not respond, and please forgive me for that. 2, I am also very, was the word, pedantic, and it's something that drives my wife nuts and some other people that know me. I can take what you say very literally, and to the point that it is problematic in communications, especially in writing, because my writing skills are also not particularly good. So there is potential problems with that. The other thing is that sometimes people who aren't, fully knowledgeable in the investment world will use the wrong word. So let me give you an example of that. Someone will say they made an account of a mutual fund. No, you didn't. You open up an account. The account is held by a custodian. That custodian can be a bank. It could be a friend. But usually it's a bank or a brokerage firm of some kind or a mutual fund company. They open an account in your name. And at that point, there's no money involved. There is just an account, and there is an account number. Now, that account can be many, many, many different types of accounts. It can be a taxable account. It can be a tax deferred. It can be an individual. It can be a joint. It can be a corporate account. It can be a nonprofit account. There's an almost endless variety of types of accounts in different forms that open all these different types of accounts. The most common for my listeners are going to either be an individual, or a joint account, both of which will be taxable, or there's some kind of IRA, Roth IRA, 401k account that you may have. Now, within that account, based on an incredibly elaborate network of rules and laws that have been created over decades, you may be able to invest in different things. You can own a mutual fund, but the mutual fund is not the account. The mutual fund is owned by you in your name, and it is held within that account by that specific custodian. So sometimes when someone uses the wrong word, because I'm pedantic, I get lost. So again, forgive me if that happens. But here's a couple things that were in this letter. And again, it's not to pick on this one listener, because I'm delighted they're a listener, but this comes up in other things. It says, I kept a mock portfolio and compared it to you, and since January 1st, you've outperformed my other portfolio by 5%. Now, this is the early middle part of February, and whatever it is I advised and beat whatever they used to do by 5% in a few weeks, I'm delighted to hear that, but I'm very concerned to hear that, because my plan, my intention is to give suggestions, information, education on how you can invest for the long term. So I'm not really excited when you tell me that you did something well over 5 or 6 weeks. Quite honestly, that means you're looking and checking probably daily and weekly that you knew this. It concerns me because you shouldn't be looking at your portfolio that often. One of the basic ideas of my philosophy is to set it and forget it. This is how to invest and not spend day to day, not spend all of your time and energy. If you like doing that, that's cool. I don't even do that. Matter of fact, someone had to tell me the Dow hit 20,000 because I don't fucking care. I invest for the long run. If you invest for the short run, that's where the cushion comes into play. We've done shows about that, and of course, we will do more in the future. So don't look at your portfolio daily, weekly, even monthly. The shortest interval you should do is quarterly, 1/4 of a year. Really, for most people, once a year is going to be sufficient. Another item that was in the email was, quote, I took your advice on taking 20% off of the table. I mean, I'm pushing 50, so maybe I forgot, but I'm pretty sure I did not say take 20% off the table. I probably wouldn't phrase it that way. Maybe that's not their intent, but at no point in this show, in this podcast, The Phil Ferguson Show, have I ever made a declarative statement that everyone should take 20% off of the table. The closest thing I've said, and this is a stretch, but it's the closest thing I could think of, unless if I missed something, let me know. Maybe I forgot I said something stupid. It wasn't my intent. But the closest thing I said a show or two ago is that if you are approaching retirement and you are building the cushion, which again goes back to a very specific part of my overall philosophy and style of investing, that you should consider making the cushion now +1. And so what that means is, given your personal reference for risk or avoiding it, at retirement, your cushion should be 10 to 12 years of cash flow. And again, I'm not going to go over all of what that means, but if your personal goal is 10, when you're 5 years from retirement, you should have the cushion be 5 years long, and you make it 1 year longer each year so that when you are at retirement, you have 10 years of cushion. All I said was that cushion should now be +1. So if you're 5 years from retirement, you shouldn't have 5 years ready. You should have 6. And that's not because I'm terrified of Trump, which I am, but his effect on the market may be positive or negative. I do not know. I'm quite honestly surprised how much it's gone up in the last few months. The reason it's +1 is because we've had a good couple of years. 5-year average return for the stock market is 14%. That is what is driving me. It's the data that is historical that I have. 14% is not wildly high compared to the normal 10-year average. This is not like the late 90s where we had 25 to 35% a year for 5 years. But it's something to reflect on and say, hey, if I'm getting close to retirement, why not take a little bit of my long-term investment and move it to the cushion? It doesn't mean to put it in cash. It doesn't mean to take it off the table. It doesn't mean to take it out of your investments and spend on a boat. It just means to move an incredibly small portion of your portfolio, if you are less than 10 years from retirement, from long-term investments to short-term investments to make it a teeny bit safer. Another thing, I have a question here. Is your investment philosophy to stay 100% invested in bull markets without any cash, or do you keep some on the sidelines for dips? Well, I have difficulty with the question in principle, and this again may be me being pedantic. Do I stay 100% invested in bull markets? When is a bull market? Are we in a bull market right now? I don't know. I can only tell for sure a bull market if A, you give me your definition. Does it mean plus 5%, plus 10%, plus 20%, and over what period of time? And I have the ability to look back at that. Right now, are we in a bull market or a bear market? I don't know. I mean, it's going forward. Is this the very end of what has been a relatively good bull market for years? Is it the beginning of a bear market where it's going to lose a lot? I don't know. I don't make those predictions. I don't pretend to know. And that's one of the keys of my overall philosophy is accepting my ignorance. I have no idea in the short run what the stock market can do. The only data I have that's valuable and has been shown to be valuable by different investors over time is long-term data. And in the long run, 10, 15, 25 years, the market makes about 10%. So where should you be if you're a long-term investor? In stocks. Who is a long-term investor? Virtually everybody. If you are 65, unless there's something you haven't shared with me, you're probably going to live 20 plus years. You're a long-term investor, at least with part of your portfolio. That's why the other part is in the cushion. If you intend to leave money to a charity, to your spouse, or to your kids, you're definitely a long-term investor. If you're anything under 50 or 40, you're a long-term investor. Almost everybody is a long-term investor. Only you can know if you're really a long-term investor or not. And if you're a long-term investor, my guidance is to ignore what happens daily in the stock market. Do not wait for dips to invest your cash. What will happen is you will be one of those poor people who, example, I had someone contact me that said, Phil, I had $200,000 in the market in 2007, and it went down by half, and I had $100,000 at the end of 8, and I pulled it out waiting for a good time to buy, and now the market has gone up 200% since the bottom, and when should I get in? Well, I don't know. When should you have gotten in? You should have never taken it out. That's the answer. If you had never taken it out, you would have doubled your money. And you could have done nothing and spent more of your free time waiting for the future. And again, the email goes on, should I wait for a substantial correction of 10% or greater? Well, given what I just said, no. If you're a long-run investor, having part of your money sitting in cash, whether you put it in now or wait for it to drop 10%, that 10% savings that you may get, of course, you may never get it, but even if you did get it, it's going to make a very little difference to your portfolio in the long run, but it also indicates to me a mindset that you want to watch daily, weekly, or monthly and get in and get out. You want to sell rapidly when it jumps 10%. You want to throw more money in when it falls 10%. That is a lot of work, A. And B, history has shown it generally doesn't work because you have to be right more often than you are wrong. And that is very, very, very hard to do. And of course, even if you're right, moving in and out of the market, if you're in a taxable account, can create trading costs and tax consequences. So not only do you have to be right more often than wrong, you have to be right more often enough to cover all the additional costs and expenses of the trading and the tax consequences. And again, history just shows people can't do it. So let's accept our weaknesses, let's accept our ignorances, and do long-term buy and hold. You should be 100% in the market 100% of the time, unless there's some really extreme situations like we had back in the 90s where the market went up 25 to 30% a year, because you can start to look at that and think, the market can't do this. But anything shy of that, even when we had 2013, the market went up 33% 1 year. But the years before that weren't particularly great. The year after that wasn't particularly great. We just celebrate the fact that it went up 32%. If you were in full retirement and the market goes up 32% and you personally want to take a little bit off and put it in the cushion because you'll feel better, okay, I can work with that. But the general advice for anybody else would be, don't do anything, just keep investing. If we get to the point where the market goes up 20 or 30% for several years in a row, I might change my attitude. So it's kind of a delicate dance. I don't do market timing, but I will do adjustments. And we don't want to be stupid, but these are long-term, big picture things, just like I am recommending, and I've had several listeners tell me that they've reduced their exposure to long-term bonds because we do have a reasonable expectation that rates are going to go up. And so you're making very little return, 2, 3, 4% in these longer-term bonds, unless they're very risky bonds. And there's a potential downside if interest rates go up, and that looks quite likely. It's not like predicting the stock market where I have no idea. Interest rates are kind of predictable sometimes, usually not, but right now it seems pretty likely. And they still might not go up, but it's an educated guessing process. So anyway, I wanted to share some of that. So hopefully most of you find what I say clear and understand it, and hopefully it's not me, but I do have to allow for the possibility because I get these emails that I'm not being clear. So basic things: buy and hold, invest for the long run. If you have a shorter time horizon, that money, or at least part of that money, goes into the cushion. All right, so that'll end my little rant. We'll take a little break, and we'll come back with our interview.
And they told me the story all about this guy named Lehi who lived in Jerusalem in 600 BC. Now, apparently, in Jerusalem in 600 BC, everyone was completely bad and evil, every single one of them, man, woman, child, infant, fetus. And God came to Lehi and said to him, "Put your family on a boat and I will lead you out of here." And God did lead them. He led them to America. I said, America? From Jerusalem to America by boat in 600 BC? And they said, yes. Then they told me how Lehi and his descendants reproduced, and over the course of 600 years there were two great races of them, the Nephites and the Lamanites. And the Nephites were totally, totally good, each and every one of them, and the Lamanites were totally bad and evil, every single one of them, just bad to the bone. Then, after Jesus died on the cross for our sins, on his way up to heaven, he stopped by America and visited the Nephites. And he told them that if they all remained totally, totally good, each and every one of them, they would win the war against the evil Lamanites. But apparently somebody blew it, because the Lamanites were able to kill all the Nephites. All but one guy, this guy named Mormon, who managed to survive by hiding in the woods. And he made sure this whole story was written down in reformed Egyptian hieroglyphics chiseled onto gold plates, which he then buried near Palmyra, New York. Well, I was just on the edge of my seat. I said, "What happened to the Lamanites?" And they said, "Well, they became our Native Americans here in the U.S." And I said, "So you believe the Native Americans are descended from a people who were totally evil?" And they said, "Yes." Then they told me how this guy named Joseph Smith found those buried gold plates right in his backyard. And he also found this magic stone back there that he put into his hat and then buried his face into. And this allowed him to translate the gold plates from the Reformed Egyptian into English. Well, at this point, I just wanted to give these two boys some advice about their pitch. I wanted to say, okay, don't start with this story. I mean, even the Scientologists know to start with a personality test before they start telling people all about Xenu, the evil intergalactic overlord.
This is Phil Ferguson with Polaris Financial Planning, the home of science-based investing. I see people owning really bad investments all of the time. Many advisors are paid a commission by a big company to sell you something you may not need. It's kind of like church. They create fear, then they tell you what you want to hear, and then they take your money. What you want is an advisor that is paid only by you. That is a fee-only fiduciary advisor. Remember, people work for who they are paid by. You can contact me, Phil, at PolarisFinancialPlanning.com, or listen to the cleverly titled The Phil Ferguson Show. Each show, we have an interesting investing skeptically topic and an interview with someone fighting to end religion. Polaris also gives 10% of gross revenue to support the growing secular movement. You're not just getting better investments, you're helping to change the world.
You're listening to The Phil Ferguson Show.
All right, everybody, welcome back. This is, of course, Phil Ferguson, and you are still listening to the cleverly titled Phil Ferguson Show. And with me today, I have Hemant Mehta. He is also known as the Friendly Atheist. It kind of goes with the Phil Ferguson Show. Hemant, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
Well, you know, we were talking pre-show, and I'm still thinking that maybe I'm going to have to, distort your voice or something because I can't have you sounding better than me.
I try.
That's right. You must have actual equipment and stuff that you're using.
There's a microphone somewhere.
Well, it's funny because one of the things that I notice very frequently, and this is a tip for any would-be podcasters, do not spend $500 or $800 or $900 on a microphone. It's a complete waste. I see guys that buy these studio-quality microphones that they see in radio stations. And one of the problems, of course, with those microphones is that they'll pick up any sound in 360, which for a podcast, you only want it to pick up your voice. You don't want it to pick up your keyboard and the truck that passes by from UPS outside. So anyway.
Yeah, this one works just fine, hopefully.
Yeah, I think I spent $150 on mine, and it works really well. So don't get too nutty with that. And speaking of which, you do have a podcast still? Is that you're doing that?
I do. Friendly Atheist Podcast, because like you, I just got tired of thinking of names.
Yeah.
I do it with a friend of mine, Jessica Bloomkey. So we either do it together, or if we can't get together, I'll do an interview or something by myself. But it's a cool way to kind of talk to people who I find really interesting and I want to talk to, who are doing really interesting things and can kind of amplify the stuff on the blog and the videos and stuff. So it's a neat way to kind of talk about atheism in a way I don't usually get to do on my website.
And it is still focused, well, you just said it, on atheism, and that's generally it. Do you every once in a while kind of go off of that subject and do something fun or different just because you want to?
Atheism, science, politics, but more or less when it comes down to it, it's about atheism or church-state separation or things like that.
Yeah. I mean, and that's your bread and butter. That's the Friendly Atheist. That has been the blog has been going how long now? 10, 12 years?
More than 10 years, I think. It's been a big chunk of my adult life.
And if I recall correctly, I don't know that we met 10 years ago, but it's getting pretty close to that now.
It must be.
Because I do remember the story when you were going to churches even before you put out the book. That's how long.
Then that's been about 10 years, yeah.
And, of course, I'm not going to mention the book because I know you've heard enough people talk about that book. But you've put out some more since then, haven't you?
Yeah. So I Sold My Soul on eBay. It came out like 2007, I believe. And since then, I wrote one with the help of Patheos, the website I write for. That was called The Young Atheist Survival Guide. I put out one other that was kind of a compilation of blog posts and whatnot. And I'm working on another project that I can't announce yet, but I hope I can announce it later this summer or something, which I'm working on with a friend of mine, So we'll see. I mean, it's what's neat about it is I've kind of had the luxury of trying a few different things. Like the eBay book, I sold myself on eBay. That came out with a real publisher, like a real marketing team and all that sort of stuff. So I got the real book, writing experience, which is invaluable in a lot of ways. I've also done things more or less through self-publishing, which you actually learn quite a bit. And I've seen a lot of self-published books that look amazing, and they have as much reach as any quote-unquote legitimate book does. And so I think the one I'm going to do with a friend, we're going to do it by ourselves too, because there's no need to do it with a publisher necessarily. So I'm super excited about that.
So is that new book, I know you can't give us details, but is it going to talk about the fact that you've been born again and you're going back to Christianity?
Don't give it away. It is absolutely nothing about that. I'm actually, the friend of mine that I'm working with is taking, she's doing 99% of the work. I'm mostly just kind of helping out on the back end. So it's all her book. We'll talk about the topic and stuff later. But more or less, this is a chance for me to just kind of do things in a background role, which is kind of nice as well. And I don't have to worry about the writing because she's a fantastic writer. So I'm not worried about any of that. So it's a different experience. I'm looking forward to kind of working on it.
Well, it's funny because I'm hoping this fall to start working on a book myself. It's something I've talked about for a decade or more. But I finally found someone who's going to help me write it, because if it was dependent on my writing skills, it shouldn't be published, quite frankly.
Well, I think one of the things that happens is you become so much of a perfectionist when it's your voice that you're talking about. And that can kind of be a hamper because, you're never satisfied. I mean, I write blog posts every day where 10 minutes after it goes up, I'm like, damn it, why did I say that? I should have written something different. I do that all the time. So, I mean, it's kind of daunting then to write a book, which you can't necessarily go back and revise every 5 minutes.
Yeah. Well, you're being very, very kind because the idea that I might have a problem because I'm a perfectionist. No, it's I have a problem because I literally suck as a writer. 5 years of writing blogs myself, I rose to the level of insignificance, and a large part of that is because so when I talk in person or like this, if I use the wrong there, nobody knows.
Right. All the grammar stuff you want to get right, all the little things that you don't want to have to worry about, but you do. But then again, if you're just kind of writing the way you talk now, I'm sure it would come off fine.
Well, it's funny because one of the things the writer that I'm talking to suggested is that we go back through and listen to a lot, because it's going to be something about investing and how to apply skepticism to investing. And he said we can go through and listen to a lot of the show segments that I did and just write that and then rewrite it. So it'll
just make it look right for the page instead of the spoken stuff. And that's a great way to do it. It's a lot of the stuff I've done too in my own work, which is put out kind of a draft of stuff I would like to write about on the website. Because once I see the comments ripping me apart for, not saying X, Y, and Z, it's like, yeah, you're right. So that when I go back and if I want to use that in the future, I can address a lot of those issues so that the next draft is much, much better.
Well, I do remember back in the day that the readers can get very diligent at correcting you. How's that? How's that for polite?
Yeah, I don't read comments, to be honest. I mean, I will look at them on YouTube, which is odd because YouTube's not exactly a good comment place. But there aren't as many, so I can kind of scroll through them fast. But on the website, I stopped reading them maybe 6-7 months ago. I will only look at them on purpose if there's something I'm looking for. Like, I really want to know what the reaction is to that post. Or, this was a controversial topic. I'm really curious how it went over. Then I'll glance at them. But the truth is, I stopped looking at the website's comments. There are just, and I don't say this as like a humble brag or something, there are too many. I'm not really worried about them getting like out of hand. I as far as I know, the issue is not that crazy people are coming in and saying horrible things. It's just a lot of comments. And I can't go through them and try to write other posts. So that was the lowest priority kind of on the list. So hopefully they take care of themselves. I'm lucky that some readers will kind of email me and say, hey, you should check this spam, or someone saying this horrible thing. yeah, I'll go back and take care of that. But I stopped reading the comments as a kind of a requirement a long time ago.
So now on the podcast, let's focus back on that for a minute.
Yeah.
What are some recent things specifically? Who have you talked to on that show?
You know what? Recently, I'm trying to think of some of the guests we've had. We've talked to a lot of church-state separation experts to talk about what the new Trump administration and his appointments mean for people who care about church-state separation. I had a chance to talk to some filmmakers in Chicago who they're working on the end parts of a documentary called, I believe it's called We Believe in Science. And we talked about the name of that because that sounds kind of odd. It's not something you believe in, but they had a reason for it. And their documentary is all about the Creation Museum and Ark Encounter specifically.
The We Believe in Dinosaurs.
We Believe in Dinosaurs. You're right. So I had a chance to go to their studio and talk to one of the filmmakers and one of their producers about that project and how they got access, because that was a neat thing too. Like Ken Ham allowed them to come on board and do everything. And of course, now that the film is nearing completion, of course he's complaining about it. But as far as I could tell, and I haven't seen a rough cut of it, it sounded like they were pretty straightforward. They even featured one of the designers of the things on Ark Encounter. They portrayed him straightforwardly. I mean, this is what he's doing. This is what he believes. That's how documentaries work. So that's been a really neat thing. Other things that were neat, I got to hang out kind of at the American Humanist Association a few months ago when they were in town for their big convention, and they gave me the opportunity to just kind of sit in a spot and interview whoever I could get my hands on, basically. And I got a chance to talk to some really neat people there. And you know what? The other couple things we've been doing lately, just talking to people who are making news in the atheist world. So someone like Galen Broadus, who filed a lawsuit so that humanist celebrants, secular celebrant, those are two different things, but so they could perform weddings in Illinois. He had to file a lawsuit to be able to do that under that title, secular celebrant. And then, a couple times we just had me and Jessica just chatting about stuff on our minds, which sounds like a throwaway, but it is kind of organized in a certain sort of way, and that's also really fun. So, yeah, it's been a neat sort of thing. In my head, podcasting is not the thing I do. Blogging is, but this is a cool way to kind of amplify that other stuff that I'm doing, and it's super fun. It's just a neat way to talk to really interesting people, and people are always willing to talk, so that's always nice too.
Now, you're still doing the videos, of course, too?
I am still doing videos too. Those have not come out as frequently as I would like, mostly because I coach a high school team, and this is the busiest part of our year. And so once that ends at the end of February, I can go back to making more videos. But yeah, there's still videos going up on the Atheist Voice channel.
Well, it's an amazing thing, and I think it's still one of your more popular videos was, what was it, how not to talk to an atheist, or questions not to ask an atheist? What was that
things
titled?
You shouldn't say to an atheist, some variation of that. And basically it's, the things like, oh, you lost a loved one, I'll pray for you. It's like, I know you mean well, but it doesn't come across that way to people who are atheists. So it was a lot of those type of things and kind of the response that I'm saying in my head, but I'm not going to say out loud. That one got a lot of traction. That was one of the first ones we ever did. And since then, it's been fun kind of experimenting with the format, because I remember one time it was one of the Super Bowls, and we made videos in advance that said, the Bible predicted that Team X would win. And I think the Seahawks were one of the teams in the Super Bowl that year. And we could say, look, here are 5 Bible verses that predicted the Seahawks were going to win the Super Bowl. And we also made the same video for whoever they were playing that year. And then we just kind of waited until the third or fourth quarter when whichever team won put the game away. And we're like, we can upload the right video now. And it sounded like we totally made this thing well in advance and predicted it. And of course, at the end, we're like, by the way, this is the video we made for the other team had they won.
Yeah, that's awesome. I once did a blog post making very specific psychic predictions. And then a year later, I went back and reviewed it, and I was
How were you?
I was 10 for 10 and linked back for this post from a year ago. But so many people were just freaking out, and they didn't understand that that you can set the date of when you publish something back in time.
Right.
And so at the end of the year, I wrote this post already knowing what happened, backdated the published date of the post.
Yeah.
And so when they go look at it, they go, oh my God, it actually has a date from a year ago. Of course it does. You don't think I can change?
That's why it's always, what I really like in terms of messing with people, I haven't done it, I've seen it done though, is people who make very specific predictions about, let's say, the Super Bowl again coming up, where they will tweet things well in advance that say, this team is going to get a punt return touchdown as the first play of the game. I mean, they're making very specific predictions about what's going to happen during the course of the game, and they'll make them like today or, a week or two before the Super Bowl actually takes place. And then as the game's going on, they will delete all the tweets that did not happen and leave the ones that did, and then publicize that Twitter account to the world saying, yep, we predicted all of these things were going to happen, and we did not manipulate the timestamp.
Yeah.
And it would be true. And some people fall for it.
The funny thing is that same kind of thing happens in the investment world.
Yeah, like I predicted the stock would do this, but I predicted that for a lot of stocks.
There's that, but what will happen is big mutual fund companies will create what they call incubator funds, and they'll create 10 of them, and they do 10 wildly different things, and when the year is over, 8 of them failed, and they disappear. And 2 of them did really well, and they publicize and they say, we made these 2 funds last year. Here's what they did. What a huge success. Aren't we awesome? And it's all factually true, but they don't tell you that
it's selective.
Right, but it's selection bias, and they're rewriting history kind of in a way. And so their salespeople will have clients come in and go, look at this fund, look at what it's done.
Right.
And they're very excited, and they invest their money with a high fee because it did so amazingly well in 1 year. And there's no way for you as a consumer to know, just like with this Twitter thing. Well, maybe you could because you could have captured it, but all the other contrary evidence got erased.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's you got to be very careful about what you're looking at because it could look totally real. It might have actually happened at the time. It doesn't mean there's not like shenanigans going on.
Now, at your blog, and it's weird because you're not really a blogger anymore. You're the editor, right? Is that?
It's partly true and partly not. There are other writers on the site who contribute on and off, and a couple who do it more often than others. For the most part, everything you see on the site, if it has my name on it, it's something I did, and that's pretty much the majority of the posts. But there are a few other people who contribute occasionally, and then I'm editing their posts too.
Well, that's nice because you get a little bit of variety of voices and different tones and attitudes, plus more content, so it can drive the traffic.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing there is the first thing you said. It gives me the variety. So I'll give you an example. There, not too long ago, Gwyneth Paltrow, the actress, put out a thing saying if you stick this rock up this part of your body, it'll help you out. And it's like, I know that. Me personally, I'm like, well, I know that's BS, and I can go ahead and try to explain why it's wrong, but I have a writer who's really good at that sort of like, here's why it's wrong, and by the way, I'm a woman, and I'm going to be super snarky about this because it's bad for you, it's bad for your health, and she did a way better job of writing that piece than anything I would have written. So it's kind of nice that I could say, hey, this is a good article for you if you want to take this one.
I like that a lot, and I think that's a good way for blogs to go forward. Another question, totally different topic, if I can. Yeah. You are probably acutely aware that in the last year or more, some atheistic conferences have had attendance numbers. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I wonder why some of the conferences have gone down, and I wonder if part of that is oversaturation. I wonder if part of that is there wasn't much necessarily to rally around, and some of it's fluctuation. Where are you going to have it? When are you going to have it? So, for example, there was this huge Reason rally in 2012 that took place in Washington, D.C. As far as I can tell, that's the largest gathering of atheists in the U.S. ever for any event.
I believe so.
20 to 30,000 people estimated. This year, 2016, they had a Reason rally again. I don't know what the numbers are. I never saw any real estimates for the numbers, but anecdotally and just with my own eyes, because I was there, it did look smaller. And I was trying to figure out why that was the case, because to me, this was a big deal. And to me, this was one of those, if you've never done this sort of thing before, it's a life-changing experience. And there's so many reasons I could point to in my own head as to why that happened. Maybe it was who was on stage. Maybe it's how they got the word out about the conference. Maybe people came 4 years ago and they're like, I don't need to do this again. Or maybe they thought church-state separation wouldn't be an issue this election. They were wrong about that. So there's a lot of reasons. I would say, though, that with the Trump administration and all the issues that are going to be coming down the pipeline, I wonder if that would get more people interested in these events where you are listening to speakers who are talking about these issues, where you might be able to be surrounded by sensible people again, where, in your regular life, you might not be. So I don't know how much of a difference that'll make. I do know that some conferences, though, seem to get a lot of people all the time. Like the Freedom from Religion Foundation does their once-a-year annual conference. As far as I know, it's kind of the same attendance all the time. Yeah. Not a lot of drop. I think Skepticon, which takes place once a year, usually gets roughly the same high hundreds number.
We could talk about that. Out. I don't know that that's true anymore.
Okay, has that gone down too? Yeah. I don't know, but the point is, like, some of these ones usually do okay. Money is obviously a big concern, but that's always been a big concern. Skepticon's free, but like some of these other conferences cost a lot of money. You can't necessarily bring your kids because they'll get bored. So you got to take a lot of that stuff into consideration, but that's also always been the case. So I don't know that that's changing anything.
It is, and I've also noticed in some places, like you are in or around Chicago, and I'm a couple hours south, and the listeners haven't figured it out by now. I'm moving much closer to Chicago. It'll be a suburb in the most liberal definition of suburbs, because I'm going to be 40 miles, although Naperville is 25 to 35 miles, depending on where you measure from. But in Chicago, there's not. You would think a city and counties and, I mean, all the surrounding suburbs, you'd think there'd be dozens and dozens of large active groups. They're not.
Right. No, they're not. And usually in the cities that are fairly liberal, you don't necessarily have a lot of big activisty groups because you don't necessarily need it. You probably know enough atheists anyway. But if you live in the Bible Belt or the South or some rural community where you don't know a lot of atheists, those groups are usually exist, and they're usually pretty strong, even if they're just on like Facebook and stuff.
Well, I know at Nashville last year, in under 60 days, put together a conference with one keynote speaker, David Silverman, and had over 400 people. And it was, you'd be amazed if you didn't know this, it was in a public high school.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and they got the space, they qualified, and there's I think 7 or 8 groups around Nashville, and they all worked together to throw this conference, and it was amazing. But then you have other cities like Chicago. There's a good and long-running skeptics group, but there's others, but it's usually, we'll meet at the library or we'll go out for a drink, and they're not particularly big because, like you said, it's not like living in Little Rock or South Carolina or Georgia where people get really motivated because you've got to make a change. And maybe, if there's a silver lining to the cloud that I'm going to call Trump, these groups might get more motivated and actually see a purpose for getting together and doing something.
That's entirely possible. I know there's an FFRF chapter in Chicago that actually does a lot of, not necessarily activism. There's not necessarily the church-state battles to fight, but when there are like nativity scenes on public property, they will fight to get a banner that promotes atheism. Just to show, hey, we have an alternative perspective and we have every right to be on here too. That sort of activism is still important in fairly liberal areas.
So what do you think drives that religion? What compels the religion or the religious followers to have to be everywhere all the time? Why do they have to have prayer at a high school football game? Why do they have to have the nativity on public property? What's the rationale behind that?
I don't know what the rationale is for. I mean, they always want to do it. That's never an issue. What is amazing to me is that they assume that, one, that anyone's trying to stop them from doing it, and that, two, that anyone else who has a differing perspective who either wants to do the exact same thing, somehow they're a problem. Or when church-state separation people say, hey, you can pray privately, you can do it however you want, but in certain situations, for example, at a high school, the coach can't pray with the kids. They can't lead the prayer, they can't participate in the prayer. That's a form of coercion. That specifically is not allowed. If the kids want to pray on the football field after a game, they can do that. So it's like we know what the lines are. We know when it's crossed. The people usually arguing for prayer have no idea what the rules are. They just assume they can do whatever they want whenever they want. So that's usually where the discrepancy comes about, where we're just saying, hey, color inside the lines. That's kind of it.
And now we have a nominee, at least at the time of this recording, Ms. Voss.
Yeah, DeVos for education.
Yes, thank you, DeVos for education, that specifically said that she wants to use the educational system to promote her specific religion.
Yeah, I mean, she's been a long-time proponent of charter schools, which are publicly funded, and she wants kids to have vouchers so they can get money to go to whatever school they want to go to, but that includes religious schools. And it's not like non-Christians or non-Catholics have a lot of religious schools. So basically she's saying, I want to use taxpayer money to allow people to attend fundamentalist Christian schools that have no oversight, that say whatever they want about science, that, you know, that teach the Bible is literally true or what have you. She wants to use taxpayer money to fund that stuff. And I mean, it's so many lawsuits just waiting to happen if she ever tried to implement this stuff. And there's a lot of problems with DeVos, but that's just one of them.
Yeah. So what do you see for the future for your growing media empire? I mean, we've got YouTube and the podcast and the blog. What's next?
It's a good question because you assume there's a future for all of us.
Dun, dun.
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I do know that because of what I do, which is a lot of online stuff, it is so fleeting. And I'm one of the lucky ones that gets to do this sort of thing every day, which is awesome. I'm under no illusion that I'll get to do this forever. So I would like to keep it going as long as I can. But in the meantime, it's kind of the same thing as I did with YouTube and the podcast, which is to say, right now, the blog is kind of my bread and butter. That's what I do. But that also, I have the opportunity to try a few new things. And so every now and then it's let's throw something at the wall and see if it sticks. And there have been plenty of failures. And those are two of the things, the blog, the podcast, and the YouTube videos. Those are things that have been fun and that have gotten a good response too. So those worked out. I don't know what the next thing will be. I don't know if the next thing is going back to writing books because I don't read as many books now as I used to. I read more articles online than ever before. I don't know if the next thing is doing something totally different or working with an organization or, I don't know the answer to that. So it's one of those things that I just like to put myself in a situation where if anything interesting comes about, I can kind of jump on it. But for now, I'm really happy doing the stuff I'm doing.
Sure. If you look at all of the blog posts over the years, can you think of anything, and I won't put you on the spot, where you made a real difference in the world? What would you pick for a topic?
Yeah, that's a good. You'd have to ask readers, not me. But I can tell you, I can remember a couple things, which is, we used to do a lot of big fundraisers on the site. We don't anymore. But for Jessica Alquist, when she filed the lawsuit and won the lawsuit, a high school student fought a church-state separation case. She won. We did a fundraiser for a scholarship on her behalf and raised, like tens of thousands of dollars. That was amazing. We also, by the way, quietly, we didn't really get any mention of this. We just kind of did it because it was cool. We raised money to drill a well in Africa. And they actually, when the well was dug, I think the charity is called Charity Water. It said from friendly atheists everywhere on the banner. And they sent a picture of it because we raised a couple $1,000s for that. That was really neat. So we've done some of that stuff. And, I'd like to think that after doing this for 10 years nonstop, more or less, that readers who maybe started reading the site before they were atheists, maybe this reading it day after day, you kind of get to thinking, you know what, you are right about that stuff. So I'm going to adopt kind of that mentality too. I'd like to think that happened for some people. I hear from some of them every now and then. But that would be a really nice way to say, hey, that's had an impact on people because they read it, they changed their mind because of whatever it is I said. Maybe not one post, but the culmination of several of them, reading them over, a long period of time, and maybe you change your mind. That would be really neat.
Well, I know you've met my wife, but I don't know if you knew this officially. Maybe you did, but your blog was a big part of her losing her faith.
Excellent.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome.
It was funny. It was a culmination of a couple of things. We went to Arkansas, and she was going to Missouri Synod Lutheran Church, and the services in Arkansas were wildly different than what they were in Illinois. And she was under the impression that if you're Missouri Synod Lutheran, they should all be the same. But they had live music, and people were doing hand raising and all this stuff. And when she came back, she said something along the lines of, I think they've modified the style of the performance to maximize their income.
She figured it out.
And she started thinking, and she started reading 3 blogs at that time. One was Ferengula, P.C. Myers. Another one was Bad Astronomer, Phil Plait. And then yours, Friendly Atheist. And when she started reading these blogs every day, like you said, I made a point to not discuss religion with her at all. Because as the husband, it would become an argument where now she's on her own, dare I say it, spiritual journey, and it turned out great. And so your efforts actually had a real impact on someone that you know.
That's awesome.
I know.
I'm happy to hear that.
Did you get those kind of stories on a regular basis?
I get them every now and then. I realize that most people who may have been influenced or changed by any of that, they're not going to reach out and say that.
Yeah.
But every now and then I might run into someone who says something of that nature. They'll send a really cool email, and I do take note of that. I mean, I save those emails. They're really nice to get when I get them. So, I know it happens. It's not like I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't hear that stuff, but it's nice to know that, this stuff isn't going unnoticed. People are reading it. People are spreading it or changing it, or changing their minds because of whatever I wrote, hopefully. Or at the very least, they're getting more informed about these issues. Even if you disagree, even if you're religious, I would hope you're reading this stuff and you're like, oh, so that's what that other side thinks about this issue. It's not that atheists hate God. It's not some malice against Christians. They're pretty much just trying to follow the rules, and they want everyone else to follow the rules on these legal issues or whatever's going on that's unpopular.
Now, one thing I know, because a lot of my listeners are going to know you and your work, you used to go to a lot of conventions. Some years, I'm sure, more than one a month. But in the last couple of years, you've not done so much of that. Is that going to continue? Are you going to be seen and be out more? What's going on?
I've become... I usually say no to most invitations these days, partly because I have a baby, partly because... It used to be, I guess, more fun personally when I used to do them. And now it seems like almost a drag. And that's not a knock on any of these conferences. But it's like, okay, the best part about it is I get to meet people who might read the site. I get to meet some of the other speakers. That's always fun. But the rest of it, it's like, I'd kind of rather just be home with my wife. I'd rather just kind of hang out with the baby. Like, that's almost more fun right now. And so if I'm going somewhere, it's something that didn't come easily. It's not like I just said yes really quickly. It's like, this is a really cool opportunity, or I really like what they're trying to do here, so I'll say yes. But I've cut back a lot. And part of that, like I said, I'm coaching a team that pretty much keeps me out of commission between like October and February. And I love that team. I'm not going to leave that. So those months are kind of when a lot of atheist college groups tend to have speakers. So I more or less say no to most of them because I'm in the middle of coaching, rehearsing, what have you. And over the summer, it's like, those are days I have off. I'd rather just be home.
It's the summer. So is there anything coming up in the next 6 months that you are going to be at?
I'm doing a Free Thought cruise in Florida. That is in mid-March. And if you're interested in that, I can make sure I get the site for that. I'm looking. Yeah, it's just freethoughtcruise.com. So that's in mid-March. That'll be really neat. It's just kind of going on a cruise, but there is a section for atheists where we can do a couple of talks and you get to meet other atheists. So that's really neat. I'm speaking at Ohio State University at some point at the end of March as well. And
do you mean the Ohio State?
The one and only Ohio State University in Columbus. And I think those are the big ones coming up in the next few months anyway.
Later in the year, are you going to go for the Eclipse Conference for American Atheists?
I don't think I've planned anything beyond those 2 dates, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I think that the fact that they've gone to the effort to plan a total solar eclipse around their convention is awe-inspiring.
I know. It's amazing what they can get done.
Well, it's all about planning, and I think that alone makes the conference unique and fun, and 20 years from now, I can tell my grandkids I was there.
And I hope I just want to make clear, if you haven't been to these conferences, and even if you have, they are awesome. I'm not knocking the conferences at all. But this is one of those things that I realized when I was like a baby atheist. I'd go to some of these things and it's like, oh my God, this is so cool. I get to meet all these other atheists that I don't get to hang out with these sorts of people in my day-to-day life. You know what I mean? And now that I kind of do this all the time, the need to be surrounded by atheists for like another weekend, that drive isn't necessarily there because I'm like steeped in this stuff. I live in that bubble. And so, but if you're not, and if you have an opportunity to go to one of these local conferences or national conferences, you should totally go. They're really neat. And it's so cool to be kind of surrounded where you don't have to keep your guard up all the time in, that you're going to say the wrong thing or that you're going to offend people by, being the voice of reason.
And you can go and be pissed off because you're a recent deconvert. I've ran into people that way that, they you get someone who's, let's just say 18, and 6 months ago, they figured out that they're not religious, they're an atheist, and you can have some baggage with that because you could reasonably conclude that everyone you've known for your entire life has lied to you. Now,
and how often do you get that where that sort of commonality is shared between like the 18-year-old who just lost, his or her faith and the like 50-year-old ex-pastor who just realized the exact same thing.
Yeah.
And they're going through all the same thoughts. And this is the first time where they're like, you could say I'm an atheist and everyone's not going to react like you're the devil.
Well, last year I went to 14 conferences. This year it might be 6, but I still table. And now, even though my business has grown, the tabling is more just for fun because I get to hang out in the hallway and have an excuse to talk to anybody and everybody that walks by. Because conferences for me, I've never particularly enjoyed the lecture part of it because I can't sit still for an hour. But they're great speakers and great entertaining and informative talks. So,
this is exactly what I'm talking about. I can tell you that the first time I went to an atheist conference, I was in college. I went to Florida. I got a scholarship from the SSA, Secular Student Alliance, to go there. And I didn't know the organization. I was just thrilled to be able to go. And I remember Barry Lynn, from Americans United for Separation of Church and State, was the keynote speaker. And I remember listening to him and thinking, oh my God, yes, everything he's saying makes a ton of sense. And these issues, these church-state issues that he was bringing up, I'm like, yeah, that's exactly how I want to be thinking about these things. And it was enlightening because I hadn't heard anything like it. And like I just said, I'm in the position now where I hear those types of lectures all the time. Like they're on repeat, or you know what I mean? Right. I see them on YouTube. I post about them if I hear something really good. But if you're brand new to being an atheist and you haven't heard that stuff before, these talks can be really helpful. I mean, I keep that in mind every time I go to speak somewhere, which is I usually assume most of my audience does not listen to people like me. Even if they're atheists, they probably don't listen to what a lot of atheists have to say. So I kind of go in thinking, if I am your first exposure to atheism, what do I want to come off sounding like? What story do I want to tell you? What do I want to tell you about? Because hopefully by the time you leave, I don't care if you're an atheist or not, but I do care that you kind of understand where I'm coming from, why I'm motivated by certain issues. All of that's kind of in the back of my head when I speak somewhere.
I remember years and years ago, the first conference I went to was actually a skeptic conference. And really enjoyed that. And then the very next one I went to was an atheist conference. And yes, there's a lot of overlap, listeners, so just take a breath.
Yeah.
But I did notice, and it was a very big surprise to me, and it shouldn't have been, and I'm, kind of humbled by my stupidity for not thinking about this in advance. Not every atheist is a skeptic.
Right.
Not every atheist denies astrology or ghosts or wants evidence. They have all kinds of interesting and fun beliefs, but they're not necessarily skeptics about things outside of religion.
Yeah, exactly. Fun, really. That is the thought that I've realized over the course of doing this for a while, too. I mean, I remember doing this over the summer where I'm like, why on earth would any of you reading this website right now consider voting for a Republican candidate, given that the 3 or 4 who were still in the running at the time, including like Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, whatever, they seem to be so antithetical to church-state separation. And I totally get why people didn't like Hillary Clinton, but I'm like, I, for one, don't think I could bring myself to vote for any of the Republicans for so many reasons. So by all means, email me. I will keep you anonymous. Tell me why you're voting for these other people. So only a handful of those responses, I got a ton of responses, only a handful of them were like, this is how I feel about like fiscal policy, or like these are, general conservative things that I care about. A lot of them were just, batshit crazy responses, in my opinion. And so it's like, wow, there are a lot of atheists I heard from who were hardcore Donald Trump supporters. And again, that still seems weird to me, not just because of everything we've seen in the news, but because the things he's been promoting on the stump, things like, I want to allow churches to preach politics from the pulpit without consequence. I want to appoint people who don't care about church-state separation to positions of power. Wouldn't most atheists be on the side of that? Like, wouldn't all of them be on the side of that stuff, even if you disagree about other policy issues? And the answer is no. Like, there are atheists who are pro-gun, which seems strange to me, but okay. There are atheists who are pro-life. And by the way, those are not small fringe groups. Those are pretty significant numbers there. There are atheists who vote Republican despite what the Republican Party has become. So, I mean, and yes, they believe in ghosts and horoscopes, and yes, they're in the minority, but they're out there. And by the way, it should also go without saying that I've met plenty of Christians who I find myself in total agreement with on just about everything except for the God stuff.
Yeah, we had a local skeptics in the pub, and a Christian showed up and wanted to know, what do atheists think? And I had to go through the whole little monologue about, well, there isn't a thing that atheists think. I mean, atheism...
Richard Dawkins doesn't tell us this is the 7 things you must believe.
I'm not even sure I like the word atheism. It simply, you are either an atheist or you are not. It only answers one thing, and you could believe or not believe in hundreds, thousands of different things. And then I went to an example of like, probably most of us don't believe in ghosts, and I immediately got corrected by the person sitting to my right. And they and the Christian then went on to talk about all the evidence of ghosts for half an hour. God. And I excused myself from the conversation because I just couldn't be there anymore.
I do get a lot of those messages, though, that are like, is it okay for atheists to believe in ghosts? Because I think I believe in ghosts, but, I know God doesn't exist. And I just
silly.
I mean, you could do whatever the hell you want, but like, all that thinking you did about the God thing, just apply that, a couple steps to the left.
Yeah, and I think that, and another thing that I'd love to have your input on, I know we're getting kind of long in our schedule, but I have more time if you do. Sometimes it's a big debate about, if I can quote Phil Plait, don't be a dick. Is there a place for ridicule? Is there a place for sometimes being a little over the top, or should we always be the friendly atheist?
First of all, you said this at the beginning, and I didn't correct you, and I should have. I by no means am saying I am a friendly guy. I don't know that I am. I certainly don't think I am anymore. I'm probably more of a dick than I ever used to be.
I will concur with that, by the way.
Is there a place for ridicule? Yes, absolutely. But I think here's the thing to keep in mind. Some of the ridicule, something like listening to George Carlin talk about the 10 Commandments or why God doesn't exist, that might be able to shake you out of your thinking in a way that, a well-argued essay cannot. And all he's doing is mocking those ideas. So there is value in that. But I would keep in mind that if you're trying to persuade people, you got to know what makes them tick. And sometimes, I could easily post a video or a cartoon that kind of ridicules certain beliefs, and there are people who will be drawn to that, and they'll find it funny. But some people who are believers might see that and think, you're straw-manning the stuff I believe. That doesn't affect me. I'm just going to cling even harder to these beliefs that I have. It's not going to work. And so you got to keep in mind, if I'm ridiculing something that someone believes, is that going to help them change their mind? It's not always going to work. It's not always going to work for all people. So just be aware, be cognizant of who your audience is. Some of them do need to be shaken out of their system, and nothing you say is going to do that. So you need to go bigger. You need to go meaner in a sense. But I don't know that works for everybody. I will say that I'm much more like if Bill Maher says something that comes off as a dick on his show, I'm probably laughing instead of saying, oh, that's going to backfire.
Right.
And I'm way less receptive to arguments from religious people that atheists are aggressive, that atheists are, I don't know what the words are anymore, that they're just mean about it. It's
right.
like, well, sometimes you need to be. I know that certain methods probably work well for me that won't work well for other people, and vice versa. And I'm not the sort of person that just wants to walk up to people and tell them they're basing their life off of a lie. That's just, I don't feel good doing that. So, you pick and choose. I don't think everyone needs to be super nice every time. I think sometimes it really does help that we have a few voices in the midst who can be aggressive and be very blunt about saying, these things people believe are stupid, they're wrong, they're foolish, they're dangerous. And I'm glad those voices are there. It doesn't mean I have to subscribe to it. It doesn't mean I have to love the way they say it. But I mean, hell, a lot of Republicans will say, I disagree with how Donald Trump says it, but I kind of am with him on these certain issues, so I'll go along with it. You know what I mean? It's like you don't have to love everything about the way something is said in order to still get behind the ideas. God, did I just compare us to Donald Trump?
Well, I was just thinking while you were talking about all of that, years ago, I had a rule, and my wife helped me create this rule, and it was basically don't start it. And yeah. The example was, and it's softened, by the way, a lot, but yeah. We were at a county fair or something like that, and somebody had a little booth, a little trailer that got pulled up, and it said, answer these 3 questions to know if you're going to go to heaven. And I tapped my wife on the shoulder and said, I'm going to go over and talk to those people. And she goes, you're only going over there to stir up trouble. They're just doing their thing. They're not approaching anybody. They're not bothering anybody. They're only talking to people that come up to them, so leave them alone. Right. I'm like, there's merit to what she's saying, right? And we're standing in line for something, I can't remember what, and a guy is walking up from the front of the line to the end of the line and handing out pamphlets and asking to talk to you about your relationship with Jesus. And so when he comes to me and hands me a pamphlet, I turn to my wife and she's like, go for it. he came to you, and so one of my tactics, of course, in that situation, I am not trying to deconvert that guy because it's just not going to happen at the county fair. I mean, he's handing out flyers. He's deep in it.
He knows this stuff. Yeah.
But it's because I have the booming voice and maybe 10 or 15 or 20 people hanging around me, especially when they're holding their little kids and they hear some guy saying, yeah, Christianity is bullshit and it's a lie. And, people are looking at me and I'm like, hey, he came to me. I'm just defending myself. But, every tactic has a right and wrong place. And I will say, if you find yourself, dear listener, 90% of the time being a dick, you might be doing it wrong.
That's exactly. I think I find myself doing exactly what you're saying, which is to say I don't start this stuff. Even at family gatherings, even with people who know me, I am much more of I'm not even going to talk about what I do unless someone brings it up. And even then I'm not here to try to tell you why you're wrong about your religion. I don't want to have that conversation with someone who thinks I want to have a debate all the time, because I don't. I'm perfectly happy just putting my thoughts out there into the void, hoping someone will pick up on them, and I don't necessarily want to have a debate with any one person or another.
Fair enough. Well, let's tell the listener where they can find you, all the different places.
Sure. Hopefully the website will be updated soon, so I can just give you one address. But for now, the website is at friendlyatheist.com. The YouTube channel is Atheist Voice, and the podcast is friendlyatheistpodcast.com. And between all those things, you can find me everywhere.
Yay.
Or just Google Brown Atheist Guy something. You'll figure it out.
I sold my soul on eBay. They just got to look for that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show. I greatly appreciate it, and have a fantastic day.
Thank you so much, Phil, and best of luck with the continued success of this show.
What if you're wrong?
Well, what if I'm wrong? I mean, anybody could be wrong. We could all be wrong about the flying spaghetti monster and the pink unicorn and the flying teapot. You happen to have been brought up, I would presume, in the Christian faith. You know what it's like not to believe in a particular faith because you're not a Muslim, you're not a Hindu. Why aren't you a Hindu? Because you happen to have been brought up in America, not in India. If you'd been brought up in India, you'd be a Hindu. If you were brought up in Denmark in the time of the Vikings, you'd be believing in Wotan and Thor. If you were brought up in classical Greece, you'd be believing in Zeus. If you were brought up in Central Africa, you'd be believing in the great Juju up the mountain. I mean, there's no particular reason to pick on the Judeo-Christian God in which, by the sheerest accident, you happen to have been brought up, and ask me the question, what if I'm wrong? What if you're wrong about the great Juju at the bottom of the sea?
All right, we're at the part of the show where we're going to wrap things up, and I have a couple reviews. One's 5-star, and one is, well, not a 5-star. And apparently they're pretty unhappy with Phil. So let's get over these here. And the first one is from John from Hampton Roads. And John gave me a 5-star review, and it says, Phil's unique mix of financial observations and social commentary make this truly a one-of-a-kind podcast. His financial perspective provides a no-nonsense, fact-based approach to managing money that is free of the clutter and distraction we usually get from other programs. His unapologetic and sometimes irreverent observations on the state of our country with regard to religion are also refreshing and sorely needed in these trying times. I have found his perspective and advice to be very useful. Well, thank you, John from Hampton Roads. I greatly appreciate it. And then we have one from CJ with EJ. And I'm thinking that's Edward Jones. So regular listeners know this could be a problematic review. And if you had any doubt, of course, it says his title for his post is Phil Ferguson is a self-interested, egotistical blowhard. Maybe a little egotistical. And I'm definitely a blowhard. Self-interested? Yeah, sure. I'll own that. I don't have to be accused of being a sellout because I started the show with one of the purposes of making money. And quite frankly, anyone that has a podcast must, well, not must, but likely has an artificially inflated self-worth because I record shit and put it on the internet with the assumption that someone actually fucking wants to listen to it. So clearly I have issues. But that aside, CJ with EJ has some of this, and this is a really, really long run-on kind of thing, so I'm not going to read it all, but you can go see it on iTunes ratings and reviews. And of course, if you like the show, I'd love to have you give a 5-star review. It would be greatly appreciated, especially after the burning that is left behind from this 1 star. But here's a little bit of what we've had. I've seen several references to Phil Ferguson's podcast across the internet and social media recently, and I was excited to experience the podcast myself as a Unitarian Universalist and financial advisor. Starts off pretty nice, actually. After listening to several episodes, here it comes, I'm stunned by how little integrity, objectivity, and substance Phil brings to this pod. He presents himself as a man of science and rational reasoning. However, he is clearly more concerned about boosting his ego by spreading biased, sensationalized, and unconfirmed reports while disparaging all those who do not agree with his point of view or operate with a different business model. For example, he dedicated 15 minutes of a recent podcast to broadcasting his unintelligible thoughts. Of course, he disagreed with them, so they must have been intelligible, on a non-peer review broker-dealer attack piece. Now, if anyone finds a peer-reviewed attack piece on the industry, please let me know where you found it. I don't know what that even means, a peer-reviewed piece on the industry. I've never heard of or seen, and maybe I'm ignorant. Where does one find peer-reviewed articles on financial services? Now, I know that you can find them on finance and economics and things that are related to it, but something specific to a broker-dealer, I'm not quite sure. And he goes on to talk about this piece, which unfortunately I'm not sure which podcast he's referring to or which specific story I must have shared a link to many, many weeks ago. But Mr. Ferguson, he goes on, Mr. Ferguson slings mud at all financial advisors who do not operate under his preferred fee-only model. Well, that's pretty true. Not that they're necessarily bad, and I have run into quite a few, so I'll correct him here, at financial advisors that do a really nice job for their clients. And unfortunately, because of the show and because of the way I do things and what I talk about, I do get to see an unfair representation of the industry. Matter of fact, earlier in the show, we talked about a type of CD, certificate of deposit, that's linked to the market and how it made 5% when the market went up 25%. A pretty weak link to the stock market, apparently. So those products are out there. They're awful, and people who are probably really happy with their advisor generally aren't calling me because they're really happy with their advisor. And he goes on to make claims that the products that I describe are non-existent, they don't really happen, no one sells them, and it would be illegal for them to do so. So throughout all of this, CJ makes very inflammatory word choices, calls me all kinds of terrible things, some of which I'll own, but others are off topic and baseless. But at no point does he provide any citations for anything that I have wrong. And that should be pretty easy to do. I talk about a lot of stuff. I do make mistakes. So it would have been nice to have something to discuss, but then he goes on at the end to defend places like Edward Jones, which I'm assuming he works for, and I have probably mentioned them in the past in a suboptimal light. So he's a little concerned about that. But anyway, anyone can write opinions, and clearly I have proven that anyone can have a fucking podcast. So once again, for regular listeners, thank you for being here, and thank you for sharing the show, and thank you for making 5-star reviews at places like iTunes or Stitcher. It is greatly appreciated. And I think, I almost forgot. I was going to wrap up, but I was a little ahead of myself. Just an update for you on my upcoming speaking tour in the Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Northern Virginia area. A couple things that I do know pretty sure now. I will be flying into Philadelphia on March 29th and getting my rental car, of course. And I've got to figure out where I'm staying the 29th yet. I don't know. And I'm going to stay with a nice family, which I'm not going to give you their name or information, but Thursday night and Friday night in or around the Washington, D.C. area. On Friday night, I will be speaking at the Washington Area Secular Humanist, and when I have the exact address in front of me, in a future show, I will give you more information about that. Saturday the 4th, April Fool's Day, I will be back in Pennsylvania to talk at York, the York group, and then on the 2nd, Allentown, Pennsylvania, and then later in that same day, I will travel over to New Jersey. On the 3rd, I will be speaking in Philadelphia, probably with my good friend Margaret Downey. She will be there. And the 4th, probably be a day of rest, maybe see some sights. in Philadelphia, the Liberty Bell or the Constitution, some fun things like that. So if you're around and have time to kill during that time frame, let me know. And, of course, the 5th, making it one nice solid week, I will be flying back. So at least at this point in time, it looks like I have 5 talks to give, and they will be ranging from, I know 2 of the talks have been selected already, how to help kids or children out of religion, and another one will be on investment scams and ripoffs, some of the stuff that I cover on the show with personal examples and stories about people that have actually bought these kinds of products and how it went for them. So if you're in that area and want to stop by one of those events, I welcome you. If you need more details, hopefully they have something up on their website and you can Google it, or let me know, and as I give more specific information, locations, addresses, exact times, I think it's all planned. I just don't have that information because it is a whole month away. Let me know, and I can send you some information. You can, of course, contact me, Phil@PolarisFinancialPlanning.com. And until I see you in person, ciao.